Welcome to Midnight Rain Tales. The world sleeps, and the rain begins to whisper. In this quiet hour, stories drift through the night air, soft, chilling, unforgettable. Here, under the midnight sky, we share the tales the rain refuses to forget. Stay close and listen. A tremor ran down my spine the instant my fingers closed over the aged leather of that book. An unfamiliar effluvium rose from its pages, less the familiar dust and decay perfume of antiquity I knew from years as a collector, and more the cloying miasma of damp cardboard forgotten in some lightless cellar. It stung the nostrils, a persistent, invasive scent that made my eyes water. The cover bore no title, only cracked integument marred by faint, enigmatic scratches. Why this particular volume, amongst the others jostling within the wooden crate, exerted such peculiar gravity I cannot say, yet I recall the faint tremble in my hands as I parted the initial leaves. That moment marked the genesis of a cascade of aberrations that would erode the foundations of my senses. Curses, hauntings, such notions held no purchase in my mind, yet this singular object radiated a disquietude, the phantom weight of observation settling upon me whenever I dared to touch it. My name is Arthur Pendleton. Books found their way to me through an inheritance, a sizable collection bequeathed by an obscure branch of the family tree, some great uncle recalled only as a sepia-toned photograph. A solicitor's voice, disembodied over the telephone line, informed me of a crate of rare volumes awaiting collection. One unremarkable afternoon, I wrestled it into the boot of my car and drove it back to my house, a somewhat secluded dwelling near the town's fringe, chosen precisely for the space it offered my ever-expanding library. The attic is a labyrinth of shelving. The hallway walls groan under the weight of forgotten lore. My pride resided in the meticulous order I maintained, an order irrevocably disrupted by the arrival of this new consignment. The crate itself appeared deceptively mundane, stained and bristling with loose nails. Within lay perhaps 20 volumes, most ravaged by time, jackets obscured by grime, pages absent without leave, cryptic scribbles defacing inner covers, and then, nestled amongst them, the nameless leather-bound anomaly. Thicker than its companions, its cover was a dark, bruised brown that might once have been obsidian black. Corners capped with tarnished metal, bronze, perhaps steel, gleamed dully. Lifting it required unexpected effort. It clung to its place with a strange inertia. Upon my desk, I eased it open. The pages, brittle as autumn leaves, exhaled that scent of wet earth mingled with the ghosts of long-dead libraries. Immediately my eyes fell upon grotesque illuminations depicting alien anatomies, some with impossibly elongated limbs, others possessing faces unnervingly blank. The lines were stark, the ink faded to sepia shadows. A medieval bestiary, perhaps. Yet the initial pages offered no recognizable script, only arrays of symbols that defied interpretation. As I turned a few more leaves, a constriction formed about my ribs, a tightness preventing a full breath. A faint, papery susurrus whispered nearby. The window, I thought, but it was shut fast, the air in my study stagnant and close. Fatigue, I reasoned, dismissing the sound. I closed the volume, its weight settling heavily on the desk, and left it there, deferring any further exploration. Later, I moved it to a separate shelf, quarantined from my established sections. In the ensuing days, while I cataloged the remaining acquisitions from the crate, mostly standard antiquarian fare, holding little intrinsic excitement, my attention kept migrating towards the strange book. Each passage past its shelf saw my gaze snagged by the spine, unmarked, a worn column of brown leather. The first sleepless night arrived roughly 3 days after the crate's homecoming. I surfaced from slumber near midnight, prickling with the distinct sensation of being watched. My mouth was parched. En route to the kitchen for water, I perceived a sliver of light beneath my study door, a lamp I never employed. My pulse hammered against my ribs. My breathing grew shallow. Edging the door open, anticipating an intruder, I found the room empty, the overhead fixture dark. The illumination emanated from a small desk lamp, rarely used. Its beam focused directly upon the leather-bound book, now resting inexplicably on the desk surface. I stood transfixed, staring, as a chill unrelated to the room's temperature traced its way up my arms. I extinguished the lamp and retreated hastily to my bed, the throb in my neck echoing my racing heart. Morning brought the anchor of reason, or the attempt at it. Perhaps I'd flicked the switch inadvertently, a forgotten action. A cold knot of apprehension settled in my stomach as I lingered over coffee, postponing the inevitable return to the study. When I finally forced myself inside, the book lay open. This sent a ripple of cognitive dissonance through me. I distinctly remembered closing it, shelving it. Approaching cautiously, I saw a page filled with further sketches, cowled figures arrayed in a circle. The dryness returned to my mouth. I shut the volume firmly, pressing my palms flat on the desk to steady myself, striving to banish the unease. A trick of memory, I insisted internally. Details blur when one is distracted. I slid the heavy tome into a desk drawer, turned the key in the lock, and deposited the key into my organizer tray. That day, I immersed myself in routine. Errands beckoned in town, posting old magazines to a fellow enthusiast, procuring groceries. Yet, even amidst the mundane transactions, the book shadowed my thoughts. A tension coiled in my gut. Perspiration gathered beneath my arms despite the cool air. Calm down, I admonished myself. It's merely an unusual artifact. Upon returning in the late afternoon, I went directly to the study. The drawer remained locked, offering a fleeting moment of relief. Unlocking it, I found the book precisely as I'd left it, closed. An exhale, tinged with self-reproach for my paranoia. I left it entombed and proceeded to prepare dinner. Later, while reading in bed, a sound drifted from upstairs. It resembled the turning of pages, yet amplified, more substantial than mere paper shifting. I lowered my own book, listening intently. Old houses breathe, floors settle, pipes clang. I knew the familiar chorus, but this was distinct. A soft, dry rustle, a pause, then another. The frantic drumming resumed in my ears. Air vents, settling dust, anything but that. When the sound persisted, I rose, slid my feet into slippers, and stepped into the corridor. The susurrus grew clearer as I neared the staircase. My legs felt leaden ascending the steps. Flicking on the hall light, I advanced slowly towards the study door. It stood slightly ajar. The rustling continued from within. With trembling fingertips, I pushed the door fully open. The small desk lamp glowed again. And there, centered on the desk, The book lay open, its pages flipping, one after another in the still, breezeless air. I stood paralyzed, my mind scrambling for logical purchase and finding none. Then, abruptly, the pages ceased their movement. Silence descended, amplifying the ragged sound of my own breathing. Bile rose in my throat, coating my tongue with a sour taste. I forced a step forward, placing a hand flat upon the open book, pinning the pages. The paper felt unnaturally cold beneath my palm despite the room's warmth. Slowly, deliberately, I closed the cover, my hands shaking so violently I had to grip the edges tight. I switched off the lamp and backed out of the room, refusing to turn my gaze from the doorway. As I retreated downstairs, a faint creak echoed from behind me. I didn't look back. The remainder of the night was spent on the sofa, the television murmuring inanely, a bulwark of noise against the encroaching silence. Morning dawned upon a stiff neck and a dull ache behind my eyes, souvenirs from my contorted vigil on the couch. I compelled myself upright, shuffling towards the solace of the coffee machine. Anxiety about the study lingered, a palpable presence, but avoidance was unsustainable. Around 9, I trudged back upstairs. The door remained open. The lamp was off. The book sat on the desk, closed. A powerful urge to destroy it warred with a stubborn, perhaps foolish, need for understanding. I picked it up, the leather cool against my sweaty palms. Flipping through, the pages adhered slightly. More bizarre creatures stared back, alongside those recurring hooded figures captured in various gestures, arms uplifted, gazes seemingly fixed beyond the confines of the parchment. Each encounter with those cowled shapes sent a prickling sensation across the nape of my neck. The marginalia remained impenetrable, a script of alien sigils. I slammed it shut with sudden violence. A new strategy formed: exile to the attic. Fetching a thick plastic sack from the kitchen, I slid the volume inside, sealing it tightly. The narrow attic stairs seemed steeper than usual. Each step was an effort, my arms feeling strangely weak. Locating an old trunk used for storing miscellany, I unlocked its clasp, thrust the bagged book inside amongst the clutter, and secured the lock once more. Enough, I told myself. Descending, I sought refuge in routine, cleaning, dusting, sorting records. Yet my gaze kept drifting ceilingward, the unease a persistent undertone. Sleep refused me again that night. Around midnight, a different sound emanated from above. Not pages turning, but something softer, heavier, muffled footfalls, or perhaps the drag of coarse fabric across floorboards. My heart leaped, hammering against my ribs, its frantic rhythm palpable in my wrists. I fumbled for the flashlight beside my bed. The house was plunged in darkness. Every instinct screamed against ascending, yet the sounds could not be ignored. I crept upwards, each stair groaning its protest. My throat constricted, I swallowed against the dryness. Reaching the attic door, I paused. The noise had ceased. My hand, slick with sweat, closed around the cold doorknob. Turning it slowly, I peered into absolute blackness. The flashlight beam sliced through the dark, illuminating swirling dust motes. Boxes and skeletal shelves cast long, dancing shadows. In the far corner rested the trunk, closed, undisturbed. I advanced cautiously, floorboards sighing beneath my weight. Kneeling before the trunk, I verified the lock. Secure. The book remained imprisoned, yet the air here was thick with that same musty, moldering odor, intensified, almost suffocating, As I rose, a flicker of movement registered at the edge of my vision. I spun around, flashlight beam jerking wildly. For a heartbeat, I saw it. A dark shape huddled in the corner near a stack of old crates. A figure draped in shadow, seemingly cowled, though details remained frustratingly obscure. My breath hitched. My legs turned to water and I stumbled backward, colliding with a small box that clattered loudly. In that instant, the shape dissolved, melting back into the deeper shadows behind the crates. A strangled gasp escaped me, my heart a frantic bird against my ribs. I retreated slowly, the flashlight trembling uncontrollably. No further sound broke the silence, save the ragged gasps of my own breathing. I slammed the attic door shut, bolted downstairs, and locked myself inside my bedroom, pressing my back against the solid wood as if to reinforce it. Cold sweat drenched my skin. Dizziness washed over me. Sinking to the floor, I struggled to regain control of my breathing, my arms tingling with pins and needles. Eventually, I crawled onto the bed, staring wide-eyed at the ceiling, listening. Nothing more disturbed the night, but sleep remained an elusive stranger. The following morning, fueled by desperation and caffeine, I turned to research. Surely this book, this object of palpable malevolence, had left some trace, some record. Hours bled into one another as I scoured online archives, searching for matching symbols, descriptions, illustrations. Nothing. A dull throb pulsed behind my temples from the screen's glare. An insidious urge surfaced to retrieve the trunk, to confront the book directly, examine it minutely, but raw instinct screamed against it. Leave it undisturbed. The memory of the hooded figure lingered, a chilling imprint on my mind, a trick of the light, a shadow born of fear and a wavering flashlight beam. Yet the conviction persisted. I had witnessed something utterly alien. Over the subsequent days, the phenomena persisted, evolving subtly. The rustle of pages returned at odd hours. Faint creaks seemed to shadow my movements from room to room. Then came the peripheral flickers, fleeting impressions of a cowled silhouette at the very edge of sight. A swift turn of the head, and nothing. My frayed nerves stretched taut. Anxiety became a constant low hum beneath the surface of my thoughts. Eating became difficult. Simple tasks dissolved into confusion. Once, preparing coffee, I dropped the mug, shattering it on the tiles, convinced I'd seen the figure reflected in the dark glass of the kitchen window. A second glance revealed only my own pale, strained face. My hands acquired a persistent tremor. After nearly a week besieged, I resolved on further banishment. The trunk would descend from the attic, relegated to the detached garage. Perhaps greater physical distance would sever the connection. I undertook the task in the late afternoon, dragging the heavy container downstairs during the hours when the house felt marginally less charged with unseen energy. Heaving it into a corner of the dusty garage, I locked the connecting door from the inside, telling myself fiercely that this was final. An attempt at normalcy followed. Music played loud in the living room. Newspapers sorted with forced concentration, a deliberate effort to ignore the chilling undertow that permeated my home. That night, I woke abruptly gagging. The smell of mold, potent and suffocating, filled my nostrils. It emanated, I realized with dawning horror, from the direction of my bedroom door. The hallway beyond lay in utter darkness. Rolling out of bed, I fumbled for the light switch, my heart pounding a frantic tattoo against my ribs. The sudden glare revealed them, footprints marring the polished floorboards, damp, misshapen outlines leading from the head of the stairs directly towards my room. Each print seemed unnaturally large, glistening wetly, the heel indistinct. My breath caught. Listening intently, I heard only the frantic thrum of my own pulse. I followed the trail back towards the stairs. The prints stopped abruptly at the top step, simply vanishing. Dizziness threatened to overwhelm me. My chest tightened painfully. Sweat trickled down my temples. No mundane causality offers solace. The book remains in its trunk, exiled to the garage. The mere thought of opening it again induces nausea. Those illustrations, the hooded figures poised in silent judgment, are seared into my memory. Fleeting shapes continue to dance at the periphery of my vision. The papery rustle whispers through the house in the dead of night. Movement flickers in the shadows. I seek refuge outside the house. In bustling coffee shops, anonymous library stacks, but inevitably I return. It is my home, and a primal stubbornness prevents me from being driven out by a cursed artifact. Yet I possess no strategy, no means to make it cease. Light now burns in the house late into the night. My study door remains locked, though I seldom venture inside. Sleep offers little respite, fractured by sudden awakenings, my eyes scanning the familiar darkness for anything amiss. The thought of burning the book arises, tempting and terrifying in equal measure. What if destruction unleashes something worse? Consulting an expert in antique texts seems logical. Yet how to articulate these events without sounding utterly unhinged? For now, survival is measured in increments, each day a struggle to maintain composure. The sounds persist. The shape in the corner of my eye grows bolder, more frequent. Each appearance triggers a visceral lurch, a desperate fight for breath until the certainty of solitude returns. This is my existence now, a life lived under siege, perpetually braced for the next whisper of pages turning in an empty watching room. He materialized onto the carriage like any other late-night wraith, and I paid him no mind. Not at first, but station blurred into station, the train shedding passengers like old skin, and still he remained, a cold serpent uncoiled in my gut. The city lights smeared past the grimy windows, distorted ribbons in the deep dark. Then came the sickening certainty. This wasn't coincidence, this was pursuit, and I was sealed inside this rattling metal artery, plunging deeper into the night, with him. Nowhere else to go. My name is Alara, 5 years etched into the city's grid, the subterranean pulse, the graveyard shift commute, the faces that flicker under flickering lights. I knew the terrain. I'd navigated the particular vulnerability of a woman adrift in the urban sprawl after midnight, worn the unease like a second skin. But that knowledge offered no shield against the terror brewing that specific Tuesday. Tuesday bled into Wednesday. The clock hand crawled past 2. Exhaustion clung to me, heavy as the humid night air, as I descended the concrete steps into the station's fluorescent maw. The platform stretched out, desolate save for a scattering of nocturnal stragglers. He arrived then, a tall silhouette beneath the harsh lights, hood pulled low like a cowl, hands swallowed by pockets. A coiled stillness radiated from him, a tension that snagged my attention despite the city's usual late-hour theater of the peculiar. Just another ghost in the machine, I told myself. This city breeds them after dark. The train screamed into the station, a gust of stale, metallic breath. I claimed a seat by the doors, seeking refuge in proximity to escape. He slid into the seat directly opposite. The car yawned, nearly vacant, yet he chose proximity. My phone became a flimsy shield. I feigned absorption, eyes averted. A surge of loud teenagers erupted into the carriage at the next stop, their boisterous energy a welcome cacophony, a temporary human wall. Relief washed over me, but relief was fleeting. 2 stops later, they vanished, leaving a vacuum filled only by the train's rhythm and him. Still there, still opposite, still I sensed, watching from the shadowed hollow of his hood. A frantic drummer took up residence behind my ribs. Imagination, I reasoned, fueled by fatigue and caffeine. Then my gaze snagged on his hands, fists, knuckles white mountains, tendons stark cords beneath the skin. They trembled, a minute vibration betraying some immense contained pressure. Time to move. I rose, aiming for nonchalance, drifting towards the far end of the car, feigning fascination with the smeared route map. A flicker in my peripheral vision confirmed it. He was rising too. Another station sighed past, bleeding more passengers into the night. We were 4 now, the shadowed man, myself, an elderly woman submerged in sleep, a businessman utterly absorbed by the glow of his laptop screen. Panic began its icy crawl. My stop lay several stations deep into the unfolding darkness, and the thought of exiting into unfamiliar, deserted streets was grim. But remaining here beside him, unthinkable. Then, smooth as poured oil, he crossed the aisle. He settled onto the seat beside me, close enough for his scent to invade my space. Stale tobacco and a faint, unsettling metallic tang. "Pretty thing," his voice rasped, low and intimate. "Skittish tonight? Just want a word." I muttered an excuse, something about a call, and lurched to my feet, aiming for the sleeping woman, a fragile bastion of potential safety. A backward glance. He was on his feet again, mirroring my trajectory, undeniably following. My pulse hammered against my eardrums, a frantic counterpoint to the train's metallic clatter. My eyes darted to the businessman, a silent scream for intervention, but he remained cocooned in his digital world, utterly unaware. The brakes hissed. The train decelerated for the approaching platform. Not mine, but it didn't matter. In the sliver of time before the doors slid open, the choice was made. Anywhere but this rolling cage. The doors parted, and I launched myself out. Heavy footfalls pounded the platform immediately behind me, faster, harder. Up the stairs I flew, steps devoured 2 at once, my lungs searing. I burst onto a street swallowed by shadows, lit only by the sickly orange glow of sparse street lamps. Directionless, propelled by pure terror, I ran, away, just away. His ragged breathing clawed at the space just behind my shoulder. Close, too close. Blindly, I swerved around a corner, finding myself swallowed by a narrow, reeking alleyway. Brick walls rose on either side, converging at a refuse-choked dead end. Trapped. The realization hit like a physical blow. Panic threatened to drown me. I spun, my back slamming against the cold, damp brick. He stood silhouetted at the alley's mouth. A harsh security lamp overhead carved his features from the gloom, eyes glinting with a feral light, lips stretched into a predatory leer. "Cornered little bird," he breathed, advancing. "Nowhere left to fly." In that instant, the ice of fear shattered, replaced by a sudden volcanic surge of rage. Enough. Enough of the shrinking, the silence, the terror. Enough of men like him seeing vulnerability as invitation. As his hand reached, instinct detonated. My knee drove upwards, a brutal, explosive impact finding its mark. A choked gasp tore from him as he buckled. Seizing the moment, I shoved with all my strength, sending him staggering back against the opposite wall. Then flight, pure, unadulterated flight, fueled by an adrenaline I hadn't known my body could produce, legs pumping faster than I'd ever dreamed possible. I didn't stop, didn't dare look back, until the harsh neon glow of a 24-hour diner bloomed at a busy intersection, a sanctuary in the urban wilderness. I crashed through the glass doors, breath tearing raggedly from my chest. One look at my state and the weary-eyed waitress steered me towards a booth, a glass of water appearing as if by magic. "Police?" she asked quietly. I could only nod, my hand trembling violently as I lifted the glass. While she spoke calmly into the phone, the dam inside me finally broke, the terror and adrenaline collapsing into shuddering sobs. Uniforms arrived swiftly, their calm professionalism a stark contrast to my frayed nerves. They took my fragmented account, offered passage home, promised vigilance. The following days were a blur of hypervigilance. Every shadow seemed to lengthen menacingly. Every unfamiliar face on the street, a potential echo of his. The subway became unthinkable, its tunnels transformed into corridors of dread. Taxis and ride shares bled my already thin finances, the cost of perceived safety. But beneath the lingering shock, a different current began to flow, a hard, defiant resolve. This wouldn't cripple me. This wouldn't dictate the map of my life. I enrolled in self-defense, the sharp physical exertion a welcome counterpoint to the lingering fear. A personal alarm found its place on my keychain. I reached out, connecting with other women in my building, weaving a network for late-night travel. A buddy system born of shared vulnerability. My story became a tool, then a weapon. I spoke at community forums, penned letters sharp with urgency, harnessed the digital currents to demand better lighting, increased presence, tangible change in our shared spaces. Incremental shifts followed. Brighter lights pierced the station gloom. More cameras blinked impassively. An app materialized, offering a silent lifeline to authorities. The patrols increased, and eventually, bracing myself, I descended back into the subway's embrace. That first ride was a trial by fire, every stop a jolt, every entering passenger a potential threat. But I endured. And the next ride was fractionally easier, and the one after that. I never encountered him again, not in the waking world, yet he stalks the landscape of my sleep sometimes, the phantom echo of his heavy tread, the memory of cold brick against my spine. I wake then, slick with sweat, my own choked cry fading in the quiet dark. But I breathe. Remind myself, I am here, I am whole, I prevailed. The encounter left its mark, an indelible alteration in my personal topography. I move through the city with a sharper awareness, now a heightened caution. Yet, paradoxically, there's a newfound solidity within me, an assertion born of survival. I learned the contours of my own strength that night. Sometimes riding the late train, I see her, another woman, her gaze flickering nervously, scanning the carriage. I meet her eyes, offer a small, understanding smile. Perhaps I shift my seat, closing the distance, becoming a quiet presence beside her, a temporary bulwark against the night. Because this is the paradox of the metropolis, isn't it? It breeds isolation and threat, yes, but it also fosters connection, unforeseen alliances, resilience woven from shared experience. We are not merely solitary atoms adrift in the urban dark. We watch, we support, we refuse to be silenced by fear. So should you ever find yourself on that late train, the air thick with unspoken anxiety, remember this. Remember you possess reserves of strength yet untapped. Remember you are not isolated. Scan the faces, meet the gaze of another, extend or accept the silent offer of solidarity. For while shadows may harbor menace, they also hold the potential for shared light, for collective courage. And sometimes, when the night demands it, we find the protector we need resides within our own skin. Yesterday dawned with a familiar complaint, a low throb anchoring itself in my spine, a protest I massaged absently while navigating the pre-dawn chill toward the kitchen. The house breathed its usual quietude, cool air settling in the corners, bearing the ghost of last night's supper. Nothing felt amiss, nothing until the passage past the spare room arrested my steps. There, inlaid into the hallway wall where blankness ought to reside, was a door utterly alien to this house, to my memory. It stood to the left, proximate to the linen closet, occupying a stretch of wall I knew as intimately as my own skin. Countless journeys down this corridor testified to its prior vacancy, yet undeniable. A simple wooden door materialized, unadorned, dark-grained timber, crowned with a knob dulled by time or neglect. My pulse leaped, a frantic drum against my ribs. A fine dew of sweat bloomed across my brow. I remained rooted, staring, dredging my mind for any forgotten renovation, any hint that this portal had ever existed. Nothing surfaced. It was an interloper, stark and absolute. Hesitantly, I advanced, each footfall strangely heavy, as if wading through thickened atmosphere. My hand, trembling slightly, reached for the knob. Cold metal met my palm, but offered no purchase. It refused to turn. I tightened my grip, wrenching right, then left. Futile gestures against its unyielding lock. Pressing my ear flat against the wood's cool surface, I strained to listen. A whisper reached me, faint, indeterminate, perhaps a dragging friction, perhaps the frantic surge of my own blood. My respiration sounded unnaturally loud in the stillness. Holding my breath, I sought the sound again. Upon exhaling, silence reclaimed the space. My shoulder met the wood next. I'm not built for brute force, but I shoved, testing its integrity. It felt immutable, akin to pushing against mortared brick, absorbing the impact without a creak or shudder. A strange resonance traveled up my arm from the point of contact, a vibration that seemed to repel my effort, stinging my shoulder slightly. This felt denser, more substantial than any ordinary household door. Crouching, I peered at the threshold, seeking a sliver of light beneath. The gap was hairline thin, revealing only an indeterminate darkness on the far side. Shadow, perhaps, or merely the absence of illumination. Once more, I assaulted the knob. Quick, desperate twists. Sweat slicked my palms. The sheer wrongness of its presence, this architectural anomaly sprung from nowhere, grated against reason. Houses don't spontaneously generate new apertures. As my fingers relinquished their grip, a distinct, albeit faint, counterpressure met my release. A sensation like something on the other side, nudging the door firmly shut. Not forceful, but undeniably deliberate. My heart hammered with renewed violence. I recoiled, wiping damp hands on my trousers, my gaze locked onto the silent sentinel. A period of stunned contemplation yielded to action. The garage held tools, remnants of minor repairs. I unearthed a crowbar from behind forgotten paint cans, its dusty metal cool in my grip, and returned to the hallway. The door remained unchanged, impassive. I attempted to wedge the crowbar's tip beneath the bottom edge, but the angle proved unworkable. Slipping it between the frame and the door itself met tight resistance. I succeeded only in scarring the surrounding paintwork. The wood was obdurate, the steel glancing off repeatedly. Each forceful attempt was met with that peculiar resistant quality, as if the door actively opposed my intrusion. My arm began to quiver with strain, the bicep pulsing painfully. Sweat traced paths down my temples. Defeated, I stepped back, breath catching, a wave of dizziness washing over me from the tension. My thoughts spiraled. Was this a waking dream? A bizarre lapse in memory obscuring some forgotten construction? Impossible. This house was old, my tenure here measured in years. I knew its every contour, every partition. No door had ever marred this specific expanse of wall. The logical next step was to call Leo, a friend whose trade was construction. I explained the predicament, a stubborn door resisting all efforts, omitting the crucial detail of its sudden genesis. He promised to swing by later. Hanging up, I tried to immerse myself in mundane tasks, but the door's silent presence dominated my awareness. I became a restless cartographer of my own home, drifting from room to room, scrutinizing walls and ceilings for any sign of alteration. The living room stood placid. Kitchen vents remained undisturbed. The spare bedroom was untouched. Inevitably, I returned to the hallway. The door persisted, locked fast. Again, I pressed my ear to its surface. Silence answered. A tentative knock yielded nothing. A harder rap echoed unanswered in the narrow space. Only the frantic thrumming in my own ears filled the void. I retreated, a profound disquiet settling deep within me. The hours crawled by, punctuated by my compulsive returns to the hallway. I'd hover near the threshold, grasp the knob, give a futile tug, then pace away, the knot of anxiety tightening in my chest. With each failed attempt, my breathing grew shallow. I'd wipe my palms on my shirt, try again, meet the same implacable resistance. The door felt mocking, an inert yet sentient challenge. Around noon, Leo texted. He was delayed, entangled in another job, unable to come. A strange mix of disappointment and relief washed over me. Perhaps I wasn't ready for external validation, for another pair of eyes to confirm this impossible reality. Night descended, cloaking the house in shadow. I sought distraction in the flickering television screen. but my gaze kept straying toward the darkened corridor. I left the hallway light burning, unnerved by the thought of that door lurking unseen in the gloom. Sleep offered little respite. It was a shallow, interrupted affair. Once a soft thud, muffled and distant, brought me fully awake. I lay rigid, listening intently, but the house remained profoundly silent. Morning arrived, heavy and unwelcome. My first conscious thought was the door. Stumbling in my haste, I reached the hallway and froze. It was gone. The walls stretched smooth and unbroken, clad in the familiar, slightly faded paint. No outline, no frame, no lingering evidence of its existence. My palms flattened against the cool plaster, searching desperately for seams, hidden catches, anything, nothing. My fingertips traced the seamless surface. My pulse, a frantic bird, fluttered against my throat. I knocked, knuckles rapping against the wall, listening for a telltale hollowness. Solid. I rapped again, higher, lower, uniformly solid. A dryness coated my tongue. I swallowed, struggling to reconcile memory with reality. That door had been tangible. The crowbar's resistance, the feel of the knob. These sensations were vivid, undeniable. Yet the wall bore no scars, no scratches, no hint of the violation I'd attempted. It looked precisely as it always had. I stood there, adrift in a sea of disbelief and confusion, gooseflesh prickling my skin. Pacing became my only recourse, scrutinizing every inch of the hallway. The adjacent closet door, the spare room entrance, all normal. Only the blank wall where the impossible had briefly resided. My phone felt heavy in my hand. I scrolled through the camera roll, a desperate hope flickering. Had I captured proof? A photo? A video clip? Nothing. The oversight felt like a betrayal. Anxiety surged. Perhaps it had been a hallucination, but the physical echoes remained. The faint soreness in my shoulder where I'd braced against the unyielding wood. Pressing the spot elicited a dull ache, confirming the memory's substance. A shaky breath escaped my lips. The day unfolded under a pall of distraction. Routine tasks felt mechanical, my focus fractured. My eyes constantly darted towards the hallway, half expecting the door's reappearance. Lunch remained largely untouched, my appetite extinguished by a persistent tension. I felt perpetually watched, jumpy at every creak and groan of the old house. Later, venturing into the basement's dusty gloom offered another avenue of investigation. The single naked bulb cast weak, jaundiced light across concrete and cobwebs. I located the area directly beneath the hallway anomaly, examining foundation walls, peering up at the subfloor joists. No sign of disturbance, no patched openings, no inexplicable structures. The concrete felt smooth, continuous. Tapping the walls with my flashlight yielded only solid thuds. My own breath sounded loud in the subterranean quiet, a chill unrelated to the temperature settling over me. I retreated upstairs quickly. That night found me standing sentinel in the hallway once more. I extinguished the lights, plunging the corridor into darkness, allowing my eyes to adjust, hoping the absence of light might somehow reveal what illumination concealed. Minutes passed. The wall remained stubbornly opaque. Reluctantly, I flicked the switch back on, my body taut, heart accelerating. Staring at blank plaster felt absurd. Yet the conviction lingered. Something remained hidden just beyond the surface. The following morning, compelled by lingering doubt, I retrieved a tape measure. Hallway length, then the corresponding wall inside the spare room. The figures didn't quite align. A discrepancy of a few inches emerged, unaccountable by standard wall thickness. Small, perhaps insignificant, yet stubbornly present across multiple measurements. It hinted at a shallow void, a sliver of unaccounted space, not a room, certainly, but an architectural inconsistency nonetheless. Pressing my ear to the wall, first in the hallway, then the bedroom, I listened for any betraying sound. Silence. Knocking yielded solidity everywhere except one small patch within the bedroom. There, a subtly hollow resonance answered my knuckles. Almost imperceptible, yet distinct enough to quicken my pulse. I tapped again, probing. Was it merely the space between studs, or something more? The impulse to cut through the drywall warred with a nascent fear, the dread of finding nothing, or worse, finding something inexplicable. In the days that followed, the acute anxiety subsided into a low-grade hum of unease. A permanent resident in the back of my mind, I performed daily rituals, washing dishes, sorting mail. The vacuums drone filling the quiet, yet my thoughts inevitably circled back to the vanished door. I found myself frequently touching that smooth section of wall, its surface cool beneath my fingertips, invariably sending a shiver down my spine. Sleep remained elusive, nights punctuated by wakeful periods, listening, straining for any sound beyond the house's normal nocturnal size. The urge to take a sledgehammer to the wall persisted, a violent counterpoint to the fear of what such destruction might reveal. Attempts to articulate the experience to friends proved futile. I carefully omitted the door's spontaneous appearance, framing it as a suspected structural oddity. Their responses ranged from dismissive jokes about hidden safes to suggestions I curtail my intake of late-night thrillers. Seeing their polite skepticism only deepened my isolation. They offered no plausible explanations for hidden compartments or impossible architecture. Sometimes staring down the hallway, I almost wished the door would return, a tangible validation of my memory. Other times, stark terror grips me at the thought. The memory of that subtle pushback, that intimation of presence on the other side, remains chillingly vivid. The hairs on my arms prickle, my breath catches. I've become tethered to the house, reluctant to leave for extended periods, plagued by the notion that further changes might occur in my absence. Morning and night, I inspect the walls. The constant scrutiny reinforces my certainty. The door could reappear, and if it does, the question hangs unanswered. Would I finally breach it, or would I flee? The thought churns my stomach. My routines are fractured, meals are forgotten, simple tasks overlooked. I find myself picking at tiny flakes of paint on the hallway wall, seeking infinitesimal cracks, revealing layers beneath. The house's silence, once comforting, now feels fraught with tension. Every shadow seems deeper, every draft a potential harbinger. Fleetingly, I sometimes glimpse it, a flicker of dark brown wood in my peripheral vision. A blink, and only the blank wall remains, leaving my heart pounding from the phantom sighting. Whether the door will ever manifest again remains unknown. All I possess is the certainty of its brief, impossible existence. I touched it, I heard it, I felt its resistance, and then without trace, it ceased to be. Now I measure walls and tap plaster, seeking echoes of the inexplicable, while the house holds its secrets close. The conviction persists. A space I cannot access lies dormant, concealed by plaster and paint, occupied by something that repelled my intrusion. Each transit of that hallway resurrects the locked knob, the pressure pushing back, the unnerving void left by its departure. That memory is indelible, as solid and real as the door itself once felt. So this is my narrative. I remain here, inhabiting this house, suspended in a state of watchful waiting. The uncanny has become normalized, a strange texture woven into the fabric of my days. A crowbar now resides in the hallway closet, a precaution, perhaps a futile gesture. Part of me yearns to demolish that section of wall, to definitively prove or disprove the void. Yet a stronger, colder part counsels restraint, whispering of discoveries best left undisturbed. For now, it remains an unsettling possibility, a palpable absence, and that is burden enough. Each morning, I check. The wall presents its smooth, impassive face. No knob, no frame, no sign. But the feeling, the certainty that it waits hidden, never truly recedes. I possess no proof, only the unwavering conviction of my own senses. And so I continue to look, compelled by a memory I cannot exercise. Because if it returns, I must be ready. Ready perhaps to finally turn the knob. Or ready perhaps only to stand and stare, paralyzed by the threshold of the unknown. Either way, resolution feels impossibly distant. My boots broke the crust of the earth on land newly mine, the late afternoon sun bleeding gold across the parched fields. Dust motes danced in the slanted light. A week since the signing, mere moments spent absorbing this place. A derelict house, skeletal outbuildings, acreage dreaming of forgotten cultivation. A peculiar hush had fallen, the very air seeming to hold its breath, expectant. Near the gnarled orchard, an anomaly snagged my gaze. A jaundiced quilt of planks laid flat against the ground, warped and stained, dissonant. I drifted closer, drawn by an unseen current. What lay beneath this crude seal? A prickle of curiosity, sharp and insistent, urged my hands forward. Hesitantly, I approached. The wood exhaled decay and damp earth. Some sections felt spongy, others brittle as bone. Crouching, I worked my fingers under an edge, pulling. Nails shrieked in protest, yielding with a rusty pop. One by one, I wrestled the boards free, laying them aside like shed skin. Revealed beneath was a dark maw sunk into the soil, a well. Its stone throat, circular and crumbling, exhaled a chill, stagnant air. Leaning in, I peered into the abyss. Blackness absolute. The dying sunlight dared penetrate only inches defeated. I strained my ears. Far below, the ghost of dripping water echoed, impossibly deep. My mouth went dry. A tremor ran through me as I braced a hand on the rough-hewn stone, leaning closer still. Then it came. A voice dredged from the darkness, shaping my name, Elias. Low, abraded, tinged with a strange metallic resonance. Spoken slowly, as if tasting the syllables. I recoiled, straightening abruptly, breath sawing in my chest. A frantic scan of the surroundings confirmed it. Emptiness, the trees stood silent. The field stretched vacant. I was utterly alone. Yet the sound, undeniably, had coiled up from the well's gullet. Sweat beaded on my forehead, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. I forced my gaze back to the hole, seeing only impenetrable shadow. Clearing my throat, I whispered my own name. Elias, an involuntary echo, a test against the impossible. The voice spoke again, seeming nearer now, though still incorporeal. Simple queries at first, confirmations. It knew me, knew this land had just passed into my hands. Why had Elias come out here unaccompanied? I stood frozen, mute mind scrabbling for purchase. No shape, no form, just that disembodied query hanging in the void. Tension locked my shoulders, a radiating ache. Retreating a few paces, I retrieved a flashlight from the canvas tool bag, slumped by the house's peeling back porch. Returning to the well's lip, I found silence waiting. Kneeling, I thumbed the switch. The beam sliced into the opening, only to be swallowed mere feet down. It illuminated slick, ancient stones, weeping moisture, the faint green fur of algae. The drip persisted. The scent of old moss and subterranean damp intensified, but nothing moved. No entity revealed itself. Then, louder, "Tell me of your life, Elias. What burrows deepest in your fear? What failures do you carry, silent and heavy?" The flashlight felt slick in my grip. I fought to regulate my breathing, the air catching in my throat. Sweat bloomed cold under my arms. My stomach twisted into a knot. Who are you?" The words emerged thin, fragile. I cleared my throat, tried again, louder this time. No answer came to that. Instead, it dredged up a ghost, a job lost years ago, the precise year, the buried reason for my departure. The parts Elias never spoke aloud. Shame, hot and suffocating, washed over me. How could it know? My light remained fixed on a patch of glistening slime, my hand unsteady. Comprehension remained elusive. The voice possessed a dry, grating quality, like iron dragged across rock. Its pitch never varied, yet it pressed relentlessly, excavating my past. It recited moments, failures, whispered my name again. "Are you afraid, Elias?" I straightened, backing away from the precipice. My eyes swept the familiar, now alien landscape. The skeletal orchard trees shedding brown leaves onto the thirsty ground. The small farmhouse with its flaking paint. The scatter of my tools. Wind sighed through the sere grass. Everything appeared mundane, utterly normal, save for the impossible colloquy emanating from the earth. No hidden speakers, no wires, no footprints, but my own ragged path through the dust. My pulse hammered against my ears. I forced myself to speak again, my voice tight, flattened by dread. "You don't know who you are. I don't know what you want." The reply was immediate, chillingly calm. It wanted to know why Elias had broken certain promises. Not promises to others, promises made to himself. A strange pang resonated in my chest, a feeling of being utterly exposed, trapped. Maintaining a veneer of control, I stepped forward once more, leaning over the void, sweeping the flashlight beam in short, meticulous arcs. Only the well's inner walls met the light, layered in grime and mold. I searched for ledges, pipes, any conceivable hiding place. "Show yourself," I called out, the demand sounding hollow. The voice ignored it, circling back. My fears. It wanted specifics. It demanded I confess the anxieties that gnawed at me in the dark. My throat constricted. Refusal solidified within me. I waited, praying for silence, but the interrogation persisted. It probed a moment of critical hesitation, a path not taken. Why had Elias shrunk from opportunity? These questions were scalpels dissecting intimate wounds, wielded by an unseen surgeon. My own breathing roared in my ears. Stepping back, I sought a more tangible interaction. I seized a long piece of scrap timber and probed the darkness, tapping the shaft against the unseen walls. Stone met wood. Lowering it further, I felt resistance. Water. The tip emerged slick and cold. Elias. The name followed by a weighted pause. It understood the hesitations. It knew why I had withdrawn from things that mattered. The hairs on my neck prickled. How? I demanded. How do you know these things? Silence was its only reply. I shifted tactics, circling the well's perimeter, examining its outer structure for any fissure, any anomaly. Nothing. The ground remained firm, the aged stones solid. My hand traced the rough surface, dislodging crumbs of moss and grit. The world offered only the sounds of my own frantic biology, heartbeat, breath, and the faint rustle of faraway leaves. The voice simply waited, unhurried, patient. The thought surfaced, cover it again, restore the seal. I hefted one of the dislodged planks, moving it toward the opening. Do not close it, Elias. The voice surged, louder now. We are not finished talking. A sudden pressure built in my chest. My legs felt watery. Keep the hands steady. What do you want from me? Regret, Elias. What is your deepest regret? I stood rigid, jaw clamped tight. The silence stretched, taut and humming. My pulse throbbed in my temples, tongue thick, stomach leaden. I swept the flashlight beam around me again, a desperate search of the innocuous surroundings. Trees, ground, house, nothing. Only my property, empty under the fading sky. Kneeling once more at the edge, I peered down. Blackness stared back. A perverse magnetism pulled at me. My legs trembled. The insane notion of lowering a rope, of descending into that gullet, flickered through my mind. To see, to understand. My hands shook at the mere imagining. It felt profoundly unsafe. The voice remained quiescent, observant. I would fetch a rope, a more powerful light. Trying to project calm, I walked deliberately unhurried toward the house. The wind felt chill against my flushed skin. 1,000 invisible needles pricked my nerves. Inside the dim farmhouse, an old coil of rope lay in a dusty corner. I tested its integrity, pulling hard. It held. I located a larger lantern, promising a stronger beam. Back outside, the raw wound of the well gaped where I'd left it. I listened. Silence. Securing the rope to a sturdy fence post, I gave it a verifying tug. Then I aimed the new lantern downward. The beam plunged deeper, revealing more slime-slicked stone, yet still no bottom. It simply vanished into the inscrutable dark. The dripping sound returned, clearer now. The smell of damp earth intensified. Elias, the voice was back. Why this sudden interest in descent? There is nothing for you down here. I swallowed the sound loud in the stillness. I want to see who I'm talking to. A laugh answered me, short, rough, a sound like rocks grinding together. Not loud, but possessing a serrated edge that raised the hair on my arms. "What are you?" I asked. It sidestepped the question. Does Elias feel he deserves this land? Has he truly earned anything? The interrogation resumed its relentless focus. Failures, inadequacies, the shedding of my old life. Jaw clenched, I ignored the probing questions. I began to lower the lantern on the rope. Scarcely 2 feet down, a sharp scrape echoed from the stone lining. I yanked the lantern back up. Fresh, raw scratches marred its metal casing. My chest seized. Something below had made contact, stepped back fast, legs threatening to buckle. Heart slammed against my ribs. I stared into that black vacancy, sweat tracing cold paths down my spine. Wiped my face on my sleeve. The urge to descend evaporated, replaced by raw fear. Whatever resided in that well had reached out, possessed something capable of scoring metal. Panic surged, a suffocating wave. Breathe slow, stay calm. "What do you want?" I gasped out. It merely reiterated its litany: fears, regrets, failures, unrelenting. I clapped my hands over my ears, a futile gesture. The voice wasn't auditory in the normal sense. It resonated within, at the edge of perception, inescapable. I backed away, step by measured step. The voice remained constant in volume, farther still toward the orchard. Only as I reached the ancient trees did it finally diminish, fading to an unintelligible murmur. My head swam, nausea churned in my gut. I stood there, gazing back at my house, my land, the sere grass, the impassive sky. Everything looked devastatingly normal, yet the knowledge of that hole, that presence, poisoned the scene. After several minutes, my breathing steadied, the panic receding slightly. Clenching a hammer fetched from the tool bag, I forced myself back. No plan, just the primitive comfort of weight in my hand. Silence greeted my return. A final look down revealed nothing but the void. Time to seal it. One by one, I wrestled the heavy planks back into place. My hands trembled, but the physical task anchored me. The thud of the hammer, the bite of nails into wood, the rough texture under my palms. I concentrated on these things, walling off thoughts of what lay beneath. Once covered, I stood back, listening. Only wind, only my own ragged breath. Arms heavy, back aching, sweat stung my eyes. I surveyed my property again. It looked the same, yet irrevocably changed. Now I knew. Something waited under those boards, something that spoke with intimate, impossible knowledge, something that scraped metal and made my skin crawl. Turning, I walked toward the house. Those boards would stay. I would not court that voice again, would not seek answers to its impossible knowledge. Forgetting was the new imperative. Unease clung to me like the dust. But I kept walking. The well was entombed. The day's work was done. Inside, the door bolted. I placed the lantern on the table. The scratches gleamed dully in the dim light. The memory of the sound resurfaced. Scrape. Muscles in my neck seized. Sleep, I knew, would be a battleground tonight. I came seeking sanctuary, a quiet erasure of the past, and found instead this resonant dread embedded in the very soil. Leaning against the cool plaster, I listened to the house settling around me, the whisper of wind in the eaves. No voice. I would leave the well undisturbed. Whatever it wanted, whatever it knew it could keep. Other tasks beckoned, fences to mend, walls to paint, a barn to reclaim. No reason ever to return to that spot. As twilight deepened, I stood at the window, watching the land dissolve into shadow. The The covered well was a dark patch in the distance, visually innocuous. My gaze remained fixed there for a long time, listening, hearing nothing but the mundane world. Finally, I sank onto a chair at the old kitchen table, attempting to unravel the tension coiling in my muscles. My head throbbed. Tried to think of something else, anything else. But the voice echoed, shaping my name, excavating my life. I remained inside through the night, the window a sentinel's post. There was no one to tell, just the waiting, the listening, to the house's groans, the sibilance of leaves, imagining the voice, but it did not return. Eventually, I surrendered to the bed, eyes squeezed shut. Waking with the dawn, my resolve held, leave the well sealed, ignore it. There was no other plan, just the quiet hope of existence beside a buried question mark in the earth. "3 weeks this house has been ours, ours to inhabit, ours to endure. Before this place, the midnight hour held no particular terrors, no anomalous sounds scratching at the edge of sleep. Before this place, a solitary helium balloon was just that, a simple buoyant toy, incapable of migrating on unseen currents of its own volition. Now the silence itself seems poised, expectant. Each evening finds my gaze drifting ceilingward, anticipating the faint skeletal creak, the whisper light scritch from above. A coil of apprehension tightens in my gut whenever my eyes pass the attic hatch recessed in the hallway ceiling. And it all began, absurdly, with the balloon. I am 33. My wife Clara and I settled on this venerable 2-story structure for its amplitude and agreeable rent. It presents a worn face to the world, a slender driveway hugging its flank, paint flaking from the porch like sunburnt skin, shingles clinging precariously to the roof, veterans of harsher seasons. Inside, the hardwood floors offer sporadic commentary underfoot, groaning in unpredictable locations, while certain door frames sag, warped by the slow weight of years. And then there's that small, unassuming portal in the hallway ceiling, the pull-down ladder granting access to the attic. Until a week passed, curiosity regarding it remained dormant. What appeal could a cramped, dust-choked space hold? Storage for holiday relics, perhaps, eventually. But the inertia of unpacking countless other boxes held sway. Clara, typically the marshal of our domestic chaos, the one ensuring repairs are swift and possessions orderly, respected my ingrained aversion to delving into shadowed crawl spaces. She applied no pressure to explore. We tacitly agreed to leave that upper realm undisturbed. Our sleeping quarters we established in the capacious downstairs room. The designated master bedroom upstairs exuded a peculiar staleness, not decay precisely, but an unplaceable lingering scent. Perhaps aged wallpaper paste, perhaps dormant mildew. Whatever its origin, the downstairs chamber felt more welcoming. The weekend following our arrival, we hosted a modest celebratory dinner. My folks came to inspect our new domain. Clara had procured a small helium balloon, emblazoned with a cheerful "congrats," tethering it to a dining chair, a whimsical flourish. Days later, long after the dishes were cleared and my parents departed, the balloon still strained against the ceiling, a minor marvel of buoyancy. Clara remarked, amused on the unexpected longevity of such things. Eventually, she snipped its ribbon, allowing it to drift freely in the hallway, a silent, buoyant jester, bumping softly against the plaster whenever we passed. This liberated balloon became an erratic fixture in the corridor's upper stratum, one moment near the bathroom door, the next nudging towards our bedroom entrance. No ceiling fans stir the air there, and the windows remain shut against the encroaching chill of night. But helium balloons possess their own subtle locomotion, don't they? Nudged by infinitesimal shifts in air pressure. I accorded it little thought. Then arrived the first tremor of the uncanny. A Monday morning, pre-dawn. Performing my ablutions for work, I traversed the hallway and registered the balloon's absence. A cursory scan of the living room, the kitchen, nothing. Not secreted in our bedroom, nor tucked away in the downstairs closet. A shrug. Perhaps it had succumbed to gravity overnight, deflated and hidden beneath some furniture. Time pressed. The search was abandoned. I departed for work. That evening, preoccupied with the logistics of dinner upon my return, the balloon slipped my mind until later. I was transporting some items upstairs destined for the spare room. Reaching the upper landing, I passed beneath the attic hatch. I paused. A dissonant note struck within me, a feeling ill-defined yet palpable. As I turned to proceed, my gaze snagged on something hovering just inside the attic's shadowed aperture above the folded ladder. I hadn't touched that hatch, yet silhouetted against the gloom was the unmistakable curve of something round. I stood transfixed, my heart beginning a heavier cadence. Rationality has always been my compass, yet the physics of a helium balloon ascending into a sealed attic defied all known coordinates. Retrieving a torch from the spare room, I pulled down the groaning attic door, its folding ladder unfolding like an insect's limb. Slowly, cautiously, I ascended. And there, suspended in the geometric center of the dusty Stygian space, hovered the balloon. The air hung thick, redolent of old cardboard and time itself. Cobwebs draped the corners like funereal bunting. Rough-hewn beams loomed low, forcing me into a crouch. The floor, mere plywood sheets over joists, felt precarious beneath my feet. No draft stirred the stagnant air. No window offered egress. The balloon, still plump with helium, drifted serenely in the heart of the room, illuminated only by the weak bulb I'd switched on near the entrance. No other exit, no vents, nothing, utterly still. I remained there for a long minute, adrift in bafflement. Finally, my hand reached, closing around the thin string. My pulse hammered against my ribs. Had Clara orchestrated this bizarre prank? It seemed wildly out of character, yet what other explanation existed? Gently, I guided the balloon back down into the relative normalcy of the hallway. I called for Clara. She emerged from the kitchen, engrossed in storing groceries. Had she ventured into the attic? Her expression was one of pure incomprehension. "Why?" she asked, her voice level. "Would I possibly bother with that filthy space?" I believed her. Her distaste for the attic mirrored my own. Besides, her afternoon had been occupied while I was miles away at work. She swore she hadn't touched the balloon. An unsettling chill remained, though I attempted levity, suggesting an improbable draft had somehow spirited it upwards, despite the closed hatch. The internal dissonance lingered. We spent the evening watching television, the balloon relegated to the living room, an unwelcome guest I wished to ignore. Sleep claimed me untroubled that night until approximately 3 in the morning. I surfaced abruptly, pulled from slumber by what sounded distinctly like soft footfalls directly overhead. A few light thuds, hesitant, then silence. 20 seconds elapsed. A few more. I lay rigid, breath held captive in my chest. Clara slept deeply beside me, oblivious. The sounds, footsteps, surely they were footsteps, persisted for perhaps a minute in total. A delicate, measured pacing, then cessation. My heart raced, a frantic drum against the stillness. My throat felt like parchment. I tried to impose reason, the house settling, ancient plumbing groaning, but the cadence, the very quality of the sound, mimicked human ambulation. Courage failed me. I did not investigate that night. I lay awake, eyes wide in the darkness, straining for recurrence. None came. Morning found me taut, frayed. I recounted the experience to Clara. Old houses make noises, she countered reasonably, especially with temperature fluctuations. If it persisted, she suggested, we should contact Mr. Henderson, the landlord. I concurred, yet the unease clung to me, inextricably linked now to the balloon's inexplicable attic sojourn. 2 days drifted by. The second night thereafter, the sound returned, punctual as a phantom clock striking 3. Faint footfalls above our heads. This time a tremor of resolve, warred with the instinct to freeze. Heart pounding violently enough to make my hand tremble, I slipped from bed, moved into the hallway, and tilted my head back, staring up at the dark rectangle of the attic hatch. Silence reigned. Clara appeared behind me, bleary-eyed. "What are you doing?" she murmured. I explained, listening intently. "Nothing." "You're letting that balloon business get to you," she said gently, urging me back to bed. The following day, I resolved to inspect the attic thoroughly. Perhaps a loose floorboard, perhaps an animal. Raccoons, squirrels, they infiltrate old structures. It was evening, around 8, when I mustered the nerve. Clara was reading in the living room. I saw no need to involve her in what might be mere paranoia. Flashlight clutched again. I scaled the protesting ladder, poking my head into the thick, stale air. The lone bulb cast weak illumination across the dusty expanse. Initially, all appeared unchanged. Dust motes dancing in the beam. A few derelict boxes left by predecessors, desiccated insect husks. Then, near a rough wooden beam, my eye caught something. I edged closer, careful on the thin plywood floor. A wave of nausea rolled through my stomach. The helium balloon was back, but this time it wasn't merely floating, it was tied. The string was looped securely around a stub of old, rusted wire protruding from the beam. I could see the knot, deliberate and tight, anchoring the balloon with just enough slack to allow a slight, ghostly sway. Disbelief rendered me immobile. A profound chill radiated through me, prickling my skin. My breath came short, shallow. I scanned the oppressive space back towards the hatch. No one. Clara was downstairs. We lived alone. Words failed me, lodging somewhere in my constricted throat. My mind spun, frantic. Who would tie a balloon to a wire in this forgotten space? Why? Forcing movement, I approached the tethered balloon. My fingers fumbled with the knot, trying to loosen it from the corroded wire. It was intricate, deliberately twisted multiple times. frustration mounting, I yanked and the string snapped. My hand shook. The balloon bobbed beside me, still defiantly buoyant. I grasped for logic. Perhaps the string snagged accidentally as it drifted, but the precision required the tightness of the knot. It felt intentional. I retreated from the attic with haste, careful not to stumble on the descent. Back in the hallway, I slammed the attic door shut, leaning against the wall, breathing heavily, forehead slick with cold sweat. Clara emerged from the living room, her eyes falling on the balloon clutched in my trembling hand. "Why do you have that again?" she asked, a hint of exasperation in her voice. I stared at her, searching her face for any flicker of deceit. She swore she hadn't touched it, hadn't been near the attic, and again, inexplicably, I believed her. Clara didn't engage in elaborate, unsettling pranks. We disposed of the balloon immediately. Scissors flashed, the cheerful "congrats" collapsing into a sad, wrinkled husk. I deposited it firmly in the trash. Closure, finality, or so I hoped. But later that night, as I lay courting sleep, the familiar soft footfalls resumed overhead. Light, almost stealthy, pacing back and forth. The sound persisted for several minutes. Quietly, I rose, stood again in the hallway, fixated on the attic hatch. My heart felt dangerously overtaxed, threatening to burst from my chest. My palms were slick. Eventually, the pacing ceased. The impulse to fling open the hatch warred with a primal fear. I remained frozen in the darkness, struggling to regulate my breathing. Images flooded my mind. An unseen occupant, a squatter dwelling in the rafters. The thought was paralyzing. My knees felt weak. Call the police and report what? Suspected footfalls substantiated by nothing. New tenants barely 3 weeks in residence sounding alarms over settling timbers or phantom raccoons. Daylight brought a renewed, albeit anxious, determination. I searched the attic again, shifting boxes, probing corners, seeking any sign of animal intrusion or hidden ingress. Nothing but dust, more cobwebs, and one substantial old trunk with a broken latch. I lifted the lid, empty, save for some moth-ravaged fabric remnants and a thin cardboard folder containing brittle, ancient receipts. No footprints marred the dust, no droppings, no discernible openings beyond the hatch itself. No evidence whatsoever of habitation. For the next few days, I maintained a facade of normalcy. Work, dinner, mundane conversations with Clara about groceries and schedules. But the nights became vigils. I grew hyper-attuned to the house's nocturnal symphony, the groans of plumbing, the expansion and contraction of old wood. Yet these footfalls were distinct, possessing a measured rhythmic quality. Step, 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 pause. Step, step. Once hearing them commence around the usual hour, I fumbled for my phone, activating the recorder. But by the time I reached the hallway, poised beneath the hatch, silence had fallen once more. The recording captured only my own ragged breath and the distant, mundane hum of the refrigerator. Our landlord, Mr. Henderson, proved laconic and unconcerned. The house was old, he reiterated via phone. Quirks were to be expected. The attic ventilation consisted solely of small screened vents near the roofline. Had we seen definitive proof of rodents? No, I admitted. Well, he concluded dismissively, let me know if you find anything concrete. The conversation terminated. Now, each evening compels me to check the attic hatch, always closed. Sometimes I stand beneath it, aiming the flashlight beam along the seams, searching for infinitesimal gaps, anomalies. Nothing. Clara observes my obsession with growing concern, gently suggesting I'm allowing it to consume me. Perhaps she's right. Yet the conviction remains. Something is profoundly wrong in that space above our heads. I tried suppression, detachment, but last night the footsteps returned, sharp and undeniable. Pressing my hand flat against the hallway ceiling beneath the attic, I could almost feel the faint vibrations. There's another detail, small but persistent, gnawing at me. The trunk in the attic. I am certain I closed its lid firmly after my inspection. Yesterday, venturing up there yet again, driven by a restless anxiety, I found it wide open, the lid thrown back fully. The meager contents, receipts, fabric scraps, appeared disturbed, rummaged through. This was no trick of memory. I know what I saw. Is there a prosaic explanation lurking just beyond my grasp? A complex mechanical resonance in the roof structure? Some bizarre acoustic phenomenon? But the balloon, that damned balloon, its impossible migration twice, its deliberate tethering, pipes and timbers don't tie knots. The balloon is gone, consigned to landfill, but its spectral presence lingers, entwined with the persistent footfalls and the inexplicably opened trunk. Clara sleeps through the disturbances mostly. On the rare occasion she stirs, the sounds invariably cease as if aware of her waking. I don't know who or what moves about up there. I've searched fruitlessly for hidden panels, alternative access points. There is only the hatch. Recently, seeking some semblance of control, I installed a small padlock and hasp on the attic door, drilling into the frame. Overkill, perhaps, but the sight of that small metal lock offers a fragile bulwark against the unknown. Now, when I look up at night, the lock gleams faintly, a small hope that entry or exit would at least be audible, a struggle against restraint. The footsteps, however, have not ceased. 2 nights ago they echoed again. More unsettling now, for if someone is truly trapped up there, the locked hatch should contain them, unless there is another way out I haven't found, or unless it's something for which locks are irrelevant. I cling to rationality. Clara suggested a professional home inspection, focusing on the attic and roof. I intend to follow through. Perhaps they will uncover evidence of intrusion, animal or human, find some structural anomaly, a hidden vent. An answer, any answer, would be a bomb. If they find nothing, I don't know. The memory replays endlessly, finding the balloon the first time, the sheer impossibility of it, then seeing it secured to that wire, a knot someone else tied, a cold fist clenching in my stomach. That sensation hasn't faded. We're contemplating breaking the lease when its short term expires. The affordability of this house is poor compensation for this pervasive dread. Clara, though more grounded, sees the toll it's taking, the sleeplessness, the constant tension knotting my stomach. Lying in bed becomes an exercise in strained listening, every creak a potential prelude making me jump. Who carried that balloon aloft? Why position it so precisely? Why bind it to that wire? Why is the trunk rifled through? I only know the footfalls continue, and pretending otherwise feels like a dangerous folly. If the inspection yields nothing, I face a choice. Until then, each night unfolds the same way. Staring at the plaster expanse above, waiting, exhaustion wars with a mind that refuses silence, projecting intruders, phantoms dwelling in the darkness overhead. Then the balloon drifts back into my thoughts, floating inexplicably into the sealed attic. Which scenario is worse? I cannot decide. For now I endure, listening in the dark, weary of the fear, inhabiting a house that was meant to be a beginning but feels increasingly like a place haunted by unanswered questions and footsteps I cannot trace. "3 weeks burrowed into my tenancy at Secure Haven Self-Storage before the wrongness of Unit 247 first pricked my awareness. A single carton, brimming with the ghosts of Christmases past, had migrated 2 inches precisely to the sinister. My certainty wasn't delusion. It was digital, archived on the phone I compulsively used to document the mundane architecture of my life, including the exact cartography of this rented concrete shoebox. Thrice I consulted the image. Unmistakably, some hand, some force had nudged that particular box. I stood sentinel in the sterile hum of the corridor, bathed in the sickly green cast of fluorescent tubes, key clutched tight. The air, thick with the scent of pulverized concrete and the dry breath of decaying cardboard, felt stagnant. Unit 247 crouched at the terminus of a long, monotonous parade of identical orange-painted metal doors, secreted away in a recess where the cyclopean eyes of the security cameras blinked blindly. This blind spot, Marcus, the facility overseer, had conceded with practiced nonchalance during the lease signing, was the justification for the modest discount. My ex-wife, Clara, had pronounced me unhinged for seeking refuge in storage post-separation. "Liquidate it all," she'd advised, her voice crisp with the logic I couldn't grasp. A clean slate. But the accumulated sediment of 12 years refused easy erosion. Thus here I lingered, hemorrhaging $89 to $99 monthly to entomb photo albums, inherited furniture, and sundry cartons of sentiment within a 10 by 10 cube. With a twist of the key and an upward heave, the corrugated door protested, rattling its metallic complaint against the guide rails. Inside, a tableau of normalcy initially presented itself. The bulwark of moving boxes lining the far wall, the venerable leather armchair bequeathed by my grandfather, the stacked plastic sarcophagi holding dormant summer attire. Then my gaze snagged. The Christmas carton shifted undeniably, and something else, more subtle yet profoundly disturbing. The fine integument of dust coating the boxes wasn't uniform. It bore faint trails, ghostly swipes, as if unseen fingers had recently traced patterns across the surfaces. My phone emerged again, a talisman against encroaching madness. New images captured, juxtaposed against the originals from 3 weeks prior. A clammy dew slicked my palms. This wasn't invention. Objects had been rearranged. Secure Haven boasted keypad gates and vigilant cameras guarding the primary access points, a unique code prerequisite for breaching the perimeter and entering the building itself. Yet, beyond that threshold, the labyrinthine corridors offered anonymous passage. I'd observed fellow tenants, spectral figures drifting towards their own repositories of memory, Perhaps a simple miscalculation, someone fumbling for the wrong unit. I scrutinized the lock, pristine, inviolate. A meticulous inventory followed box by box. Nothing pilfered merely. Displaced. The dust signatures were wrong. The very atmosphere felt adulterated, imbued with the residual presence of another's respiration. Logic screamed for police intervention, or at minimum, a report filed with Marcus. But the words curdled on my tongue. Excuse me, but my festive decorations have been repositioned 2 inches leftward. They diagnose grief-induced instability, compounded by recent unemployment. Perhaps they wouldn't be wrong. Clara certainly wouldn't have been surprised. So I embraced a different kind of rationale. A trip to the nearest electronics emporium yielded a motion-activated camera, subsequently secreted behind a stack of linens. Its unblinking eye trained on the door. Its battery promised a fortnight's vigilance. Intrusion, if it occurred, would be documented. A week elapsed in unnerving stillness. Daily, I scrutinized the camera's digital harvest. Nothing. The inanimate objects remained stubbornly inanimate. The dust lay thick and undisturbed. A creeping suspicion that I'd fabricated the entire incident began to take root. Then, during my routine weekly pilgrimage to exchange seasonal garments, I unearthed the journal. It lay wedged, an incongruous artifact, between 2 cartons of kitchenware still sealed from the move. A simple black notebook, anonymous, the sort procured from any corner drugstore. Unfamiliar. Tremors ran through my hands as I eased open the cover. The initial entry bore a date 14 months prior, March 15th, 2023. Something is amiss with Unit 247. The boxes, I swear I left them flush against the back wall. Today, they stood 3 feet forward. Management insists no one else has access. The lock shows no sign of tampering. Am I losing my mind? The notebook nearly slipped from my grasp. 14 months ago, another soul had occupied this space. Another soul had perceived the same subtle violations. Sinking into my grandfather's leather armchair, its familiar contours offering scant comfort, I read on. March 22nd, 2023. Further displacements. The plastic bins have migrated from right to left. I installed a camera. The footage is blank, devoid of explanation. It's as if the repositioning happens between the captured moments. The air in here feels wrong, dense, expectant, like it holds its breath until I leave, freeing something to roam. April 3rd, 2023. Footprints manifested in the dust today. Small, delicate impressions, perhaps a woman or a child. They originated at the threshold, marched directly to the rear concrete boundary, and ceased, vanished into the wall itself. I documented them with photographs, but later, nothing. The images showed only smooth, untroubled dust. April 15th, 2023. Whispers have begun. Not distinct words, more the faint echo of speech, like conversations concluded moments ago, their resonance still clinging to the surfaces. I queried the manager about fatalities on the premises. He denied any, but a flicker in his gaze betrayed him. April 30th, 2023. I was touched today. Reaching for a carton on the uppermost shelf, I felt the distinct brush of fingers against the nape of my neck. Frigid, I spun around. Emptiness. The door remained sealed. Tomorrow, I evacuate everything. This place isn't worth $89.99 a month. May 1st, 2023. Tried to move out. The most bizarre phenomenon occurred. None of my possessions would cross the threshold. Lifting them inside the unit was effortless, but upon reaching the doorway, they acquired impossible mass, as if suddenly filled with wet cement instead of linens and paperbacks. Even empty cartons felt anchored to the floor, resisting removal. What is happening? May 2nd, 2023. The whispers intensify. They're shaping my name now. Fragments of sentences surface. Something about staying. Something about never leaving. I am writing this from within Unit 247. My body refuses the command to exit. My legs are stone. The air is oppressively heavy. This must be the final entry. If this is found, do not rent Unit 247. Do not. The script dissolved mid-word. Blank pages followed. Later inquiries with the facility confirmed no official tenant record predated mine. Marcus asserted Unit 247 had stood vacant for well over a year. Departure was the sane imperative. Purge the unit, erase the address from memory, never return. Yet I remained. Perhaps it was the allure of the enigma. Perhaps something less conscious, a subtle magnetism emanating from the concrete walls. My visits grew more frequent, shifting from weekly rituals to biennial check-ins. I deployed more sophisticated surveillance, infrared capabilities, heightened motion sensitivity. Every box, every object became a data point in a meticulous survey, documented with photographs and precise measurements. Unit 247 held a secret, and I felt compelled to excavate it. The alterations began subtly, almost deniably. A carton infinitesimally nudged rightward, a shirt inexplicably shed from its hanger, dust patterns defying logical accumulation. But the phenomena escalated. One visit revealed every box rotated precisely 90 degrees counterclockwise. The next week presented a perfect inversion, each item having swapped positions with another, creating a bizarre mirror image of my established layout. The cameras yielded only frustration, bursts of static, inexplicable visual noise, but no culprit. Then 3 days ago, the whispers commenced for me. Faint susurrations at the periphery of hearing, like muffled voices in an adjacent space. Turning towards the source or attempting to pinpoint it, silenced them immediately. Yesterday, the footprints materialized. Small, distinct prints in the dust, mirroring the journal's account. They traced a path from the door to the back wall, then abruptly ceased. My photographs, reviewed moments later, showed only undisturbed dust. Now I sit ensconced in my grandfather's chair, chronicling this descent. The atmosphere is viscous, almost aqueous. The whispers gather strength, coalescing into recognizable sounds. Words, something about staying, something about never leaving. My legs feel impossibly dense. An attempt to stand moments ago met with unresponsive muscles. Unit 247's door gapes open, yet appears strangely distorted, viewed as if through heat haze or flawed glass. Clarity arrives with the whispers now. They speak my name, Leo. They murmur reassurance. You're home, Leo. They promise an end to struggle. No more divorce fallout. No more soul-crushing job searches. No more gnawing solitude. Stay here. In Unit 247 forever. My hand trembles as I inscribe these words. The pen itself feels leaden, gaining weight with each stroke. The air compresses, dense as the concrete surrounding me. Lifting my arms requires monumental effort. Should this journal be discovered, heed its warning. Do not rent Unit 247. Do not approach the door. Do not... 3 days hence, Marcus, the facility manager, found the storage unit vacant. The monthly fee was current, yet the tenant, Leo, had evaporated, abandoning all possessions. Furniture, cartons, photographs. The sole peculiarity lay in the arrangement. Every item thrust hard against the perimeter walls, delineating a starkly empty space in the unit's center, as if marking where someone had recently been seated. Standard procedure ensued. A thorough clean-out, and Unit 247 was promptly relisted. The new asking price? $79.99 per month. A genuine steal, Marcus would cheerfully inform prospective clients. Ideal for someone navigating a difficult transition, needing a spot for a few memories. After all, the security infrastructure was top-notch. Cameras functional, keypad entry secure. What could conceivably go awry? Unit 247 remains available. Its interior smells faintly of concrete dust and old cardboard, and occasionally, if one stands perfectly still, concentrating intently, faint whispers might be discerned. Likely just the ventilation system, of course. Probably. Marcus will offer favorable terms for immediate occupancy. Just disregard the peculiar dust arrangements, overlook any ephemeral footprints, pay no mind if the boxes seem to subtly rearrange themselves when your back is turned. It's merely $79.99 monthly. Such a bargain for a 10 by 10 portion of eternity. Avoid reading any misplaced black notebooks you might happen upon, and under no circumstances should you begin writing within their pages. The whispers grow louder still. They know who you are. They have been anticipating your arrival. Unit 247 awaits its next occupant. Are you prepared for Unit 247? The hallway's antique looking-glass snagged my gaze, mirroring back a fleeting darkness, a silhouette that had no business occupying that space. A blink and vacancy returned, yet turning back towards the drift of correspondence I'd been sorting, a glacial tremor traced my spine. Solitude was supposed to be the defining feature of my tenure in this sprawling manner, but an insistent, prickling awareness argued otherwise. Little did I grasp that my comfortable stewardship, my role as house sitter, was poised to spiral into a harrowing ballet of pursuit with an unseen adversary. My name is Alara. For half a decade, I've curated the temporary vacancies of the affluent, a custodian of dormant luxury. It's an existence draped in borrowed finery, inhabiting palatial residences, tending to coddled creatures, essentially sampling the rarefied air of the wealthy, while the proprietors themselves indulged in protracted global jaunts. The Ashworth estate represented the zenith of my assignments, a 10,000 square foot Victorian colossus reclining upon 20 acres of meticulously sculpted terrain. The Ashworths, an elusive tech magnate and his luminary wife, had embarked on a 3-month circumnavigation, leaving me in charge. Their pre-departure orientation was exhaustive, detailing the sophisticated bulwarks of the security system, the scheduled ballet of groundskeepers and cleaning crews, and the intricate litany of tasks required to maintain the home's equilibrium. For a fortnight, perfection reigned. Days dissolved poolside, lost within the labyrinthine library, or spent traversing the immaculate sculpted gardens under an indifferent sun. Then dissonance began to creep in, subtle as dust motes dancing in a sunbeam. It manifested first as minor incongruities. A novel I distinctly recalled leaving on the low mahogany table, inexplicably repatriated to its shelf. Rooms acquiring an abrupt, inexplicable coolness or warmth. Once sequestered in the cavernous kitchen, I could have sworn the floorboards above whispered with footfalls, yet my subsequent investigation revealed only untenanted chambers, silent and still. I marshaled explanations. Venerable houses groan and shift. Memory, that unreliable scribe, was playing tricks. The intricate climate control system was merely exercising its complex prerogatives. But the sensation of being observed, a palpable pressure on the skin, refused to dissipate, intensifying with each rotation of the earth. Then arrived the evening of the looking glass, mid-sort through the day's delivered envelopes. I saw it, that transient shadow, present and absent in the same breath. It was the first aberration logic couldn't neatly excise. Someone or something shared this vast house with me. Sleep became a skittish creature that night. I lay rigid, senses straining against the profound quiet, parsing every nocturnal sigh of the old structure. Just as consciousness began to fray at the edges, a muted thud resonated from the lower floor, snapping me instantly awake. A frantic pulse hammered against my ribs as I slid from the bed, fingers closing around my phone and the reassuring heft of the flashlight from the bedside table. Down the grand staircase I crept, bare feet soundless on the opulent runner. Darkness pooled thickly, shadows elongating into grotesque shapes in the meager moonlight, slanting through mullioned windows. Reaching the landing, I heard it again, a faint, abrasive scraping emanating from Mr. Ashworth's private study. Trembling digits danced over my phone screen, dialing 911, my thumb hovering, poised above the call icon. I neared the study door, finding it partially ajar. Drawing a ragged breath, steeling myself, I nudged it wider, the flashlight's beam slicing into the interior gloom. It illuminated nothing. The study stood undisturbed, pristine, everything precisely ordered. A shaky exhalation escaped me. Foolishness washed over me. Perhaps it was all imagination's cruel theater. That was when my eye fell upon the desk drawer, open merely a fraction, yet I possessed the unshakable certainty it had been securely closed hours before. A polar current surged through my veins. Someone had been here, rifling, searching. I retreated backward from the study threshold, gaze darting, frantic. The trespasser might still be concealed within these walls. Escape summoning aid, these imperatives screamed in my mind. But as I pivoted to flee, my body collided with something unyielding, something utterly out of place in the empty air. A hand clamped brutally across my mouth, smothering the nascent scream. Not one sound. A low, rough voice growled directly into my ear. Unless you want this to become exceedingly unpleasant. Sheer terror sluiced through me as I was propelled back into the study. My captor forced me into a chair, the suffocating pressure finally easing. In the dimness, I discerned a figure swathed entirely in black. features obliterated by a ski mask. "Where is it?" the voice demanded, sharp with impatience. I could only stare, mind reeling from fear and confusion. Where is what?" "Don't feign ignorance," he snarled, the sound muffled by the fabric. "The safe. Ashworth safe. Location." My thoughts scrambled. A safe? Yes, the Ashworths had alluded to one during their tour, a casual mention, but its location remained undisclosed. "I don't know," I stammered, the words quivering. "They never told me." Behind the mask, unseen eyes narrowed. "You expect me to swallow that? You've been embedded here for weeks. Surely you saw them access it." I shook my head, a violent negation. "I swear I have no idea. They keep their truly valuable items in a bank vault. That safe. It could be anywhere in this enormous place." He subjected me to a long, unnerving scrutiny, then seemed to visibly deflate. "Damnation," he muttered under his breath. "Fine. This is the new arrangement. You assist me. We search this mausoleum room by room. If I discover deception, any attempt at trickery." The threat hung, potent and unspoken, in the charged air. For the subsequent 2 hours, we proceeded through the mansion with a chilling methodicalness. The intruder proved thorough, probing behind canvases, rapping knuckles against paneling, his gaze meticulously scanning every bookshelf for the telltale signs of hidden mechanisms. All the while, my own mind raced, desperately formulating stratagems for escape or alert. As we breached the threshold of Mr. Ashworth's colossal walk-in closet, an idea sparked. "Hold on," I ventured, gesturing towards a specific expanse of wood-paneled wall. I believe I recall something. Mrs. Ashworth mentioned a concealed panel. Somewhere right around here." A flicker of avarice ignited in the masked eyes as he shifted his attention, moving to inspect the indicated section. With calculated subtlety, my finger found and depressed a small, almost invisible button on my wristwatch, a panic function integrated with the estate's security network. I offered a silent prayer for its discreet activation, hoping it would summon help without alerting my captor. "There's nothing," he growled after several minutes of fruitless examination. He pivoted back towards me, fury radiating from his posture. "You're stalling!" I retreated, hands raised placatingly. "No, truly, I was certain I remembered." He lunged, his grip closing painfully around my upper arm. "Enough games. Show me where that damn safe is, or..." His ultimatum was violently truncated by the sudden, deafening shriek of alarms. Crimson emergency lights pulsed rhythmically throughout the house, bathing everything in an infernal glow as an automated voice intoned with chilling clarity. "Security breach detected. Authorities have been notified. All exits are now sealed." The intruder spat a curse, shoving me forcefully aside as he scrambled for the door. But true to the synthesized pronouncement, it remained stubbornly immobile. We were entombed. What ensued was a terrifying inversion of a childhood game. Hide and seek played out with mortal stakes. The intruder, comprehending his entrapment, succumbed to desperation. He rampaged through the house, frantically seeking egress while simultaneously hunting me. Amidst the cacophony and flashing lights, I managed to dissolve into the shadows, finding refuge within a hidden passageway unearthed during my earlier, more innocent explorations. Concealed in the narrow darkness, I could hear his frustrated roars, the sounds of destruction as he vented his fury upon the opulent surroundings. Tears streamed unchecked down my face as I huddled, praying for the swift arrival of flashing blue lights. After an interval that stretched into an eternity, new sounds pierced the chaos. Authoritative commands, the sharp splintering of glass. Deliverance had arrived. When the turmoil subsided, I emerged, trembling but physically unscathed. The intruder was apprehended, revealed later to be affiliated with a sophisticated syndicate specializing in targeting the residences of the ultra-wealthy. The Ashworths, it transpired, did indeed possess a collection of invaluable artifacts, secreted away in a vault whose existence had remained entirely unknown to me. In the ensuing days, a blur of police statements and attempts to assimilate the trauma, the pervasive sense of violation clung stubbornly. The house, once a sanctuary of borrowed luxury, now felt irrevocably tainted, a stage for terror. The Ashworths, apprised of the ordeal, responded with profuse apologies, a substantial bonus, and effusive recommendations. Yet I knew my career as a house sitter had reached its terminus. The experience had starkly illuminated the fragility of security, the profound vulnerability that can persist even within the most fortified environments. Now, years removed, the phantom creak of a floorboard or a peripheral flicker of shadow can still jolt me from sleep. That particular fear never fully recedes, but I have learned to heed my intuition, to cultivate a vigilant awareness of my surroundings, to never again mistake safety for an immutable state, because sometimes the most insidious threats are those we unwittingly welcome across our own thresholds. And ultimately, our most potent defense lies coiled within our own perception, our own capacity for swift, decisive thought.